The world never plays fair. You could walk through life with the purest intentions, the cleanest heart, the most honest effort, and still watch someone with half your integrity win the prize you bled for. You already know this. You have watched loyalty get punished, kindness get exploited, patience get ignored, and honesty get twisted. And the cruelest part is this truth everyone avoids saying out loud. Society was never designed to reward the good. It was designed to reward the strategic, and here is a survival principle most people never accept. The ones who see reality as it is survive, the ones who adapt to its brutality rise, and the ones who rise are the ones who rule their own destiny, while everyone else keeps waiting for fairness that never arrives. You are not here to be softened by illusions. You are here to learn how the world actually moves beneath the polite surface. So let me define one concept that will change the way you see every conversation, every opportunity, every attack, and every moment of silence in your life. I call it the forbidden code. It is the kind of intelligence that watches while others rush, listens while others overshare, acts while others hesitate, and strikes only when the odds lean in your favor. It is the discipline to remain calm when provoked, unreadable when tested, and decisive when the window of power appears for a heartbeat and then disappears forever. It is not cruelty. It is comprehension. It is understanding the game instead of being the piece. But before we go deeper, let me be clear about something. This is not about destroying others. This is not about becoming manipulative or heartless. This is about defending your mind in a world that preys on the unguarded. It is about building the kind of presence that cannot be exploited, cannot be pressured, and cannot be controlled through guilt, fear, or fake morality. Today, you are going to break 10 invisible rules society taught you since childhood. You are going to see their purpose, their trap, and their cost. And when you finish, you will never move through this world blindly again. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose strategic power. Now, let us unlock the forbidden code buried beneath your instincts. You think honesty is virtue, but Machiavelli teaches us virtue is only useful when it serves power, not when it surrenders it. You have been punished for telling the full truth in job interviews. You confessed your doubts too early in negotiations and watched the other side tighten their grip. You admitted your full hand in poker and lost the pot before the flop even hit. Honesty feels noble, but constant honesty is the language of the exposed. The moment you speak without filter, you hand over control of the narrative, and in the real-world narrative is territory. Territory is influence. Influence is survival. Let me explain with a real case. A young executive walks into a boardroom expecting to be promoted. He says, "I am not ready yet. I still have much to learn." The room nods politely. His humility is praised. He walks out with a thank you and no title change. 1 week later, his rival enters the same room and declares, "I have already begun leading this division operationally. I am ready to formalize it." Same facts. Different framing, same truth. Different outcome. Machiavelli would say, the first man honored honesty like a religion. The second man honored strategy like a weapon, and only one of them gained ground. But here is where it gets powerful. Controlled truth is not lying. It is choosing what to reveal, when to reveal it, and how to frame it, so that your position strengthens rather than weakens. You do not say, "I failed last quarter." You say, "We hit an unexpected market shift, and I used it to rebuild our forecasting model, which now predicts volatility with 85% accuracy." You do not say, "I am overwhelmed." You say, "I am recalibrating priorities to ensure maximum impact where it matters most." Same reality. Different architecture. You do not owe transparency to everyone who asks. Your therapist, yes, your closest advisor maybe. Your boss only if it serves your leverage, your rival never. Your enemy, not even a fragment. When you speak without intention, you leak power. When you speak with calibration, you build walls around your weaknesses and towers over your strengths. The world rewards those who speak with precision, not those who confess with emotion. You may have been taught that silence is suspicious. Machiavelli says, silence is armor. Silence is the space where others project their assumptions, and you watch them do the work for you. Now, here is the cost of constant honesty you have already paid. You told your friend exactly how you felt about his new partner and lost the friendship. You admitted your salary in a casual conversation and became the benchmark for underpayment in your department. You confessed your insecurity to a colleague and suddenly your opinion carried less weight in meetings. You were honest. And you were diminished, not because honesty is wrong, but because timing, context, and audience were ignored. Machiavelli teaches us that a prince must appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and sincere, and yet be ready to act in the opposite way when necessity demands it. That is not deception. That is adaptation. That is understanding that the surface you show is a tool, not a confession. You do not become a liar, you become a curator. You decide what truths serve your mission and what truths serve your opponent's advantage. You protect your mind like you protect your home. You do not leave the doors wide open because it feels virtuous. Remember this phrase: truth without strategy is vulnerability dressed as integrity. Say it again. Truth without strategy is vulnerability dressed as integrity. You are not here to be liked for your purity. You are here to be respected for your precision. You are here to speak, not to unburden yourself, but to move the world in your direction. So stop telling the full story. Start telling the necessary one. You have spent years shrinking your voice to match the room's volume. You have muted your opinions to avoid rocking the boat. You have worn the same style of jacket as everyone else just to feel safe in the group photo. But Machiavelli teaches us that in the eyes of men, the remarkable is remembered, the ordinary is forgotten, and the invisible is discarded. You think blending in keeps you safe. It only keeps you irrelevant. Look at what happened to the marketing director who suggested the same campaign template year after year. She was called reliable, then replaceable, then gone. Her replacement walked in wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, spoke in deliberate pauses, questioned the client's assumptions, and proposed a counterintuitive angle no one had considered. He was called difficult at first, then brilliant, then indispensable. He did not try to fit. He made them adjust to him. And that is the difference between being hired and being followed. But here is the thing. Fitting in is not neutral. It is surrender. Every time you laugh at a joke you do not find funny, every time you nod along to an idea you know will fail, every time you mute your accent, your posture, your rhythm to match the dominant group, you are not being polite, you are erasing yourself slowly, piece by piece, until there is nothing left to stand for. And when crisis hits, nobody turns to the person who has spent years agreeing. Machiavelli saw this in Florence. The families that survived were not the ones who conformed to Medici tastes. They were the ones who built distinct reputations so strong the Medici had to negotiate rather than crush. The Strozzi did not blend. They cultivated patronage networks across Rome and Venice. They became too costly to ignore, too valuable to eliminate, too different to dismiss. Difference is not rebellion. It is insurance. Now, here is where it gets powerful. Intentional difference is not about being loud for attention. It is about being specific with your identity. You do not wear red shoes just to stand out. You wear red shoes because they signal something deliberate about your energy, your refusal to be generic, your ownership of the room. You do not speak slowly to be theatrical. You speak slowly because it forces others to lean in, and it gives you time to measure their reaction before you commit your next sentence. Every deviation from the norm must be chosen like a chess move, not a tantrum. Think of the software engineer who refused to use the company's default presentation template. He built his own with minimal text-bold typography and one data point per slide. At first, people whispered he was arrogant. Then his pitch won the biggest contract of the year. Then everyone started copying his format. He did not ask for permission to be different. He made difference the standard. That is how influence spreads. Machiavelli teaches us that he who innovates will have for enemies all those who are well off under the old order and lukewarm defenders among those who would be well off under the new. So yes, people will resist you. That is not failure. That is confirmation. You are shifting the center. Do not mistake discomfort for danger. The moment someone says you are too much, that is the moment you are becoming unmistakable. You were not born to be interchangeable. You were born to be irreplaceable, and irreplaceability begins the moment you stop editing yourself to be acceptable and start expressing yourself to be undeniable. Say it again. You were born to be irreplaceable. So stop shrinking, start signaling. You were praised for saying, "I do not know." You were called mature for stepping back. You were labeled wise for letting others take credit. But Machiavelli teaches us that humility without boundaries is not virtue. It is vacancy. A throne left unoccupied does not stay empty, it gets claimed. And your silence is not grace. It is an invitation. Watch what happened to the senior designer who never corrected her junior's misattribution of her work. 6 months later, the junior was presenting her concepts as his own evolution. She was still called humble. But no client asked for her by name anymore. Contrast that with the engineer who calmly interrupted a meeting and said, "Actually, that architecture was my proposal from March, and here are the timestamps." No anger, no drama, just clarity. Suddenly his voice carried weight. Not because he demanded it, because he refused to let it dissolve. But here is the thing. Humility is only noble when it is chosen, not when it is demanded. When someone expects you to shrink so they can expand, that is not respect, that is extraction. And you have been extracted from for years. You let your uncle talk over you at Thanksgiving because it was easier than asserting your point. You let your teammate present your research because you did not want to seem pushy. You let your partner decide everything because you confused peace with submission. Machiavelli knew that men judge more by the eye than by the hand, because everyone can see but few can touch. So if you never let people see your competence, they will invent stories about your weakness. Visibility is not vanity. It is verification. You do not need to boast. You need to confirm. You do not need to shout your achievements. You need to ensure they are not erased. Now here is where it gets powerful. Grounded confidence is not loud. It is immovable. It is the quiet correction of a misstatement. The stillness when someone tests your resolve. The refusal to apologize for occupying space you have earned. You do not say, "I am the best." You say, "This is how I solved it, and here is the result." You do not say, "I deserve this." You say, "Here is what I built, and here is what it delivered." Think of the physician who stopped saying, "I think we should try this," and began saying, based on the latest trials, and my experience with 27 similar cases, "I recommend this protocol." Same knowledge. Different authority. Patients trusted her more. Colleagues deferred to her faster, not because she changed her expertise. Because she stopped softening its delivery. Machiavelli teaches us that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what he rarely gets credit for is this. He also said the prince ought to make himself feared in such a way that if he does not win love, he avoids hatred. Fear here is not terror, it is respect for consequence. It is the understanding that crossing you has a cost, and that cost begins with the loss of your goodwill, which you now dispense selectively, not automatically. You were not trained to be humble, you were trained to be harmless, and harmlessness is the first step toward erasure, so break the rule. Be humble when it serves wisdom, but be unshakable when it serves truth. Be kind when it builds bridges, but be firm when it defends your ground. Say it again, be humble when it serves wisdom, be unshakable when it serves truth. You have cancelled plans to attend a funeral because your co-worker guilted you into staying late. You have swallowed your opinion in a meeting because the room seemed to lean the other way. You have said yes to favors you resented because you feared the label selfish. But Machiavelli teaches us that he who tries to please everyone pleases no one and loses himself first. You cannot be water for every cup. Eventually you evaporate. Look at the small business owner who said yes to every client request. No matter how off strategy, he ended up exhausted, his brand diluted, and his best customers confused. Then he fired 3 clients who demanded constant revisions for free. You raised his rates. He defined his scope in writing, and his revenue doubled while his stress halved. He did not become cruel, he became clear. And clarity is the highest form of kindness to yourself and to those who truly value you. But here is the thing. People do not respect. Yes, they respect consistency. The moment you say yes to something misaligned, they learn they can steer you, not because they are evil. Because you taught them how. Every time you override your instinct to avoid discomfort, you train others to see your boundaries as suggestions. And suggestions get ignored. Machiavelli watched the Borgias, not because they were liked, but because they were followed. Why? Because their decisions were legible, their standards visible, their consequences certain. People knew where they stood, not because Cesare explained his feelings, but because his actions left no room for misreading. You do not need to be feared, you need to be predictable in your principles. Now, here is where it gets powerful. Selective kindness is not coldness. It is precision. You do not stop helping people. You stop helping the wrong people in the wrong way at the wrong time. You say no to the neighbor who asks you to watch his dog every weekend, but never returns the favor. You say no to the friend who only calls when he needs a ride. You say no to the project that drains your energy but offers no growth. And you say yes fiercely to the mentor who challenged you, the partner who shows up, and the vision that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning. Think of the teacher who stopped staying late to regrade papers for students who did not try. She instituted a policy, 1 revision request per semester with a written reflection. The complainers left. The serious students thrived, her energy improved. Her impact deepened. She did not lose respect. She gained authority. Machiavelli teaches us that benefits should be granted little by little so that they may be better enjoyed. In other words, do not give everything up front. Let value accrue through earned trust. Let people work for your goodwill, not because you are withholding, but because you understand that unearned favor breeds entitlement, not loyalty. You were not born to be a utility. You were born to be a force. And forces do not bend to every wind. They create their own weather. So, stop distributing your yes like candy. Start investing it like capital. Say it again. Stop distributing your yes like candy. Start investing it like capital. You have waited for the promotion after 5 years of perfect reviews. You have waited for the apology that never came. You have waited for the sign, the permission, the green light, the moment when it would finally feel safe to move. But Machiavelli teaches us, fortune is a woman, And if you want to keep her under control, it is necessary to beat and coerce her. That is not misogyny, that is metaphor. It means opportunity does not arrive politely, it must be seized. Watch what happened to the copywriter who waited for her boss to notice her talent. She polished emails for 3 years. Then a junior colleague pitched a side project, got fast-tracked, and landed the creative director role. Same department, same workload, different mindset. One waited for recognition, the other created the reason for it. Waiting is not virtue, it is passive hope dressed as discipline. But here is the thing, patience is only power when it is chosen. When it is forced by fear, it is paralysis in slow motion. You tell yourself, I am being strategic, while you watch the window close. You call it wisdom while your competitors move. Machiavelli did not write The Prince while waiting for the Medici to invite him back. He wrote it to force the invitation. Now here is where it gets powerful. Decisive action does not require perfect information. It requires sufficient clarity and the courage to adjust mid-flight. You do not need to know every outcome, you need to know your minimum viable step. Launch the prototype, send the email, walk into the office and ask for the title. Not someday, not when things settle, today. Think of the immigrant who opened his food cart with $2,000 borrowed from his sister. No business plan, no permit lawyer, just a recipe and a location near the courthouse where lawyers skip lunch. He lost money the first month, adjusted his menu the second. By month 6 he had a line every day. He did not wait for the perfect moment. He created momentum and let it pull him forward. Machiavelli teaches us that it is better to act and repent than to wait and regret. Because regret of inaction is heavier, it sits in your bones. It whispers, what if, for decades, action brings temporary risk? Inaction brings permanent loss. You do not need to be reckless. You need to be responsive. The world rewards those who respond to openings, even small ones, before they vanish. You have been taught that good things come to those who wait, but history shows good things come to those who act while others wait. So break the rule, do not wait for fairness. Create advantage, do not wait for certainty. Build evidence, do not wait to be chosen. Choose yourself first, say it again. Do not wait to be chosen, choose yourself first. You stayed at a toxic job for 7 years because the CEO once called you a star. You kept a friend who mocked your dreams because you have known him since high school. You defended a partner who lied to you because divorce felt like failure. But Machiavelli teaches us that loyalty without condition is not devotion. It is dependence. And dependence is the leash the world uses to control you. Look at what happened to the lieutenant who refused to question his general's flawed strategy. He followed orders into a valley ambush. 30 men died. He survived, was hailed for his loyalty, and was never promoted again. Why? Because the new command knew he would obey even bad judgment. Contrast him with the officer who pushed back, presented alternatives, and earned a reputation for strategic fidelity, not blind obedience. He became a general by 40. But here is the thing. Loyalty should be earned daily, not granted once and never reviewed. You do not owe allegiance to a title, a memory, or a sunk cost. You owe allegiance to standards, to growth, to mutual respect. When those erode your loyalty becomes self-harm disguised as honor. Machiavelli saw this in the papal court. Cardinals who pledged unconditional fealty to one pope found themselves exiled when the next took power. The survivors were those who aligned with principles, not personalities. They served the church, not the man, and when leadership changed, they adapted without shame because their loyalty was to the mission, not the messenger. Now here is where it gets powerful. Conditional loyalty is not betrayal. It is integrity. You do not abandon people at the first sign of friction. You recalibrate when values diverge. You say, I stand with you when you lead with honesty, but I will not cover for deceit. I support you when you grow, but I will not enable stagnation. I honor our history, but I will not mortgage my future for nostalgia. Think of the startup co-founder who confronted his best friend, the CEO, about misusing funds. It was brutal. They argued for hours. The CEO refused to change. The co-founder walked away with his equity and his conscience. 1 year later, the company collapsed under audit. He started a new venture with clean partners. His reputation soared. Not because he was disloyal, because he was discerning. Machiavelli teaches us that a wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by doing so it would be against his interest. That sounds cold until you realize your interest includes your dignity, your future, and your peace. Loyalty that costs you your self-respect is not loyalty. It is surrender in noble clothing. You were not born to be a soldier for every cause. You were born to be a strategist for your own life. So break the rule, be fiercely loyal to those who earn it daily, and walk away without guilt from those who treat your faithfulness as weakness. Say it again, be fiercely loyal to those who earn it daily. You bought the car, the vacation, the influencer course, the affirmation journal, all promising joy, and for a few hours you felt light. Then the weight returned heavier, because Machiavelli teaches us that pleasure is fleeting, but purpose is forged. Happiness is a byproduct, not a destination, and when you chase it directly, you become its hostage. Watch what happened to the entrepreneur who sold his company at 34, retired to Bali, and spent 2 years doing yoga and sunsets. He was clinically depressed by month 18. Not because Bali failed him, because he had removed all resistance, all challenge, all meaning. Then he started mentoring founders for free, no money, no fame, just teaching. His energy returned, not because he found happiness, because he found utility. But here is the thing. The human mind is not designed for comfort. It is designed for conquest. When you remove friction, you remove growth. When you remove struggle, you remove strength. Chasing happiness is like chasing your shadow. The faster you run, the further it recedes. Purpose is the ground beneath your feet. It does not flee. It holds you. Machiavelli lived in exile, wrote under surveillance, and was tortured for his beliefs. He did not write about joy. He wrote about effectiveness, about legacy, about building something that outlasts you. His happiness was not in comfort, it was in contribution, in knowing his mind shaped centuries after his death. Now here is where it gets powerful. Chasing purpose transforms you because it demands you become more. The artist who paints not for likes but for truth develops a style no algorithm can replicate. The father who raises his son not to be liked, but to be resilient, builds a lineage of strength. The leader who builds not for applause, but for impact, creates systems that endure beyond his tenure. Think of the nurse who works the night shift in the IQ. She does not love the hours. She loves the weight of her role, the moment a family grasps her hand and says, "You were the only one who explained it clearly." That is not happiness, that is significance. And significance is the antidote to despair. Machiavelli teaches us that men rise from one ambition to another. First they fight to escape hardship, then they fight to build, then they fight to leave a mark. Do not confuse the absence of pain with the presence of meaning. Rest is necessary. But rest without direction is decay. You were not born to be comfortable. You were born to be consequential, so break the rule. Stop asking, "Am I happy?" Start asking, "Am I aligned?" Am I growing? Am I building something that matters? Say it again. Stop asking, am I happy? Start asking, am I aligned? You said it is okay when your sister borrowed money and never repaid. You said no big deal when your colleague took credit for your idea. You said, I forgive you when your partner broke a promise for the third time. But Machiavelli teaches us that forgiveness without memory is not grace, it is invitation. You do not teach people to respect you by erasing their offenses, you teach them by remembering. Look at what happened to the CEO who forgave his CEO's first accounting discrepancy with a warning. 6 months later, the CFO embezzled $800,000. Investigators found the CEO had ignored 3 prior red flags. He was not kind. He was negligent. Contrast him with the founder who forgave once, documented the breach, and set a clear consequence for recurrence. When the same employee slipped again, he was let go swiftly. The team respected her more, not less, but here is the thing. Forgiveness is internal, trust is behavioral. You can release the anger in your heart and still remove access to your resources. You can wish someone well and still lock your door. Machiavelli knew that men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous, not because he was cynical, because he observed, and observation is the foundation of strategy. Now, here is where it gets powerful. Remembered lessons build inner strength because they turn pain into data. Every betrayal, every lie, every broken agreement becomes a marker in your mental map, not to fuel bitterness. To inform boundaries, you do not hold grudges. You hold standards, you do not seek revenge. You seek reliability. Think of the investor who lost $500,000 on a friend's startup. He did not cut ties in rage. He reviewed the due diligence. He skipped. He updated his checklist. Next time he invested, he required third-party audits. He forgave his friend, but he never invested with emotion again. His portfolio grew, not because he was cold, because he was calibrated. Machiavelli teaches us that injuries should be done all at once, so that their bitterness being less lasting may the less offend. In reverse, this means small repeated offenses poison trust slowly, and the only antidote is consistent consequence. Not cruelty, clarity. You were not born to be a sponge for other people's failures. You were born to be a fortress for your own integrity. So break the rule, forgive in your heart if it frees you, but remember in your actions if it protects you. Say it again. Forgive in your heart if it frees you, but remember in your actions if it protects you. You skipped your daughter's recital to cover a shift for a co-worker who partied that night. You gave your inheritance to your brother so he could start a business that folded in 6 months. You stayed in a draining marriage because the kids need stability, but Machiavelli teaches us that sacrifice without strategy is not love. It is slow suicide. And a dead martyr helps no one. Watch what happened to the nurse who worked double shifts for years to support her parents. She developed chronic fatigue, lost her license temporarily, and her parents ended up needing more care than before. Contrast her with the sister who set boundaries, said, I will help 3 days a week, but I need rest to stay effective. She preserved her health, her parents got consistent care, and her siblings stepped up. Sacrifice is noble only when it is sustainable. But here is the thing, selflessness is not virtue when it enables dysfunction. Every time you give without condition, you teach others to take without gratitude. Your generosity becomes their entitlement, and your exhaustion becomes their expectation. Machiavelli advised princes to appear generous, but never be so to the point of impoverishment. Why? Because a prince who depletes himself cannot protect his people. You are not just a person. You are a system, a provider, a leader, a creator, If your system collapses everything, it sustains, collapses with it. Strategic self-respect is not selfish, it is stewardship. Now here is where it gets powerful. Elevating your presence begins with honoring your limits. You do not say, "I cannot help." You say, "I can help on these terms." You do not vanish to serve. You anchor so others can navigate. The mother who schedules 1 hour of quiet time every morning returns to her children more patient, more present, more powerful. Not less loving, more effective. Think of the pastor who stopped answering emergency calls after 10 p.m. He trained a crisis team, built protocols, and his congregation grew because people knew he was rested sharp and available during the hours that mattered most. He did not abandon his flock, he led it with structure. Machiavelli teaches us that a ruler must imitate the fox and the lion, the fox to recognize traps, the lion to frighten wolves. Your self-respect is the fox, your boundaries are the lion. Without both, you become prey to well-meaning wolves who drain you in the name of duty. You were not born to be a candle that burns itself out. You were born to be a lighthouse that stays lit for decades, so break the rule. Put yourself first, not out of ego but out of necessity, because if you fall, there is no one to catch you. Say it again, put yourself first, not out of ego but out of necessity. You have just broken 10 invisible chains, not to become cruel, not to become cold, but to become clear. Machiavelli did not write to corrupt, he wrote to equip, to give you the eyes to see the game and the hands to play it without losing your soul. The forbidden code is not about domination. It is about sovereignty. The untouchable mind is not one that cannot be hurt. It is one that cannot be hijacked. It does not react. It responds. It does not confess. It communicates. It does not wait for fairness. It builds advantage. And when betrayal comes, it does not collapse. It recalibrates. This is not the end. It is the threshold. Every time you choose strategic truth over emotional transparency, you build armor. Every time you stand in your difference, you build magnetism. Every time you say no to the wrong yes, you build authority. This is how you rise, not by luck but by design, not by accident but by architecture. Machiavelli teaches us that the wise man does at once what the fool does. Finally, do not wait for the world to change. Change your position in it. Act with clarity. Protect your power and choose who you will become, not who they told you to be. Say it one last time. I choose strategic power. Now go build your legacy.